Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We have a personality, and he's a politician kind of by the back doorway, not a politician in the true sense of the word, and that's a good thing, by the way. And we'll talk about perspectives as regards county financing. Chuck, we always try to start, we're going to have a formal introduction here shortly. We always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or maybe one or two or something about some organization or individuals in the county. Today, I'm delighted to bring up the name of a friend of mine. My father was a dear friend of this young man's grandfather, the Martin family from over there in Vinegar Hill area. Tom Martin, my young friend, is going to receive a very special recognition today from the Prairie Farmer, an upstart magazine which has only been in publication since 1841, I believe. I think they'll make it. Seriously, they have an annual Master Farmer designation wherein candidates are presented by various peoples, families or friends or so forth. And it turned out that Tom's name was submitted for inspection, so to speak, and they undergo a pretty rigorous examination before this designation is made. So today, when I leave here, we're going down to Springfield at the Crown Plaza for a nice luncheon, honoring four men only in the state of Illinois who are being designated Master Farmers. So big kudo to Tom Martin. And, we've had he and his great brother Jeff both here as guests from time to time. I always want to know, I went to see Jeff make microbes the other day. Well, not the other day, a long time ago, really. Jeff is farming with microbes, as you know, Chuck. Very interesting take. It apparently and obviously is a great thing to do, but it's sure an esoteric way of farm. It's a lot different than me jumping on Topsy and Judy and plowing the field. So, the Martin family is Cheevers over there in the Mount Pulaski area, and so I'm very proud to call them friends. So that's my kudo. Why don't you introduce our guest this morning, and the kudo to him too for submitting himself not only to you and I, but to the electorate in general.
Yeah, Chuck Reuben is just a real fine fellow and a very brave man. He's here to talk about the sales tax issue that's going to be on the ballot. And that's TAX is a four-letter word, I think, to most people.
TAX, four letters, 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes, I remember 3 letters. Okay,
count the exclamation point at the end.
Oh, the exclamation, okay, all right.
At any rate, Chuck, you were telling us that there are several ballot issues throughout the county, one and the next, and then we have this tax issue that would affect the whole county. Maybe you can tell us a little bit. I thought your figures were so interesting about what it's going to amount to per $100 and the reason for the need.
Well, the tax is going to amount to 50 cents per $100 of merchandise purchased, but excluding a lot of necessities. Food is not on the list of taxable items for this tax, and it's going to raise the sales tax currently runs between in the county proper it's 7 3/4, so it would raise it up to 8 1/4, and it's going to raise a considerable amount of money for the county if it passes it. We have the current public safety tax in place of 1/2 cent. This would raise it to 1 cent. And we passed that several years ago, and it brings in around $825,000 to $850,000 a year. And that it will allow us to bond money to fix the dome and to add on to the jail. And they're pretty big issues.
Yeah, Mr. Reuben, I'd like to address 2 things that I want to really emphasize. Number one, you know, you hear the word TX, that four-letter word that Judith talks about, with the exclamation point. we hear about, and immediately our backs start to rise. Go, God, I'm not going to pay any more taxes, etc. You know, but I want to emphasize something: $100 spent, and there's not all commodities. There's some commodities that are exempt, but $100 and it's on 50 cents. Now that's a very minuscule amount, and I really think that we need to stress that, because Lord knows, Judith, you and I, none of us want to pay any more taxes, but 50 cents on $100, and you compare that to the crying need that not only we have now, but ahead of us. That county jail situation is a bad situation, and we're lucky that we don't have some higher authority on us all the time because of the way we have to house our prisoners. The courthouse dome, Lord knows, we have to keep that roof, and that's a treasure. And I know you have to say sometimes, well, so what? That's a dome. Well, it's more than that. So we need to emphasize the need versus the minuscule amount.
And when we talk about the courthouse dome, we're actually talking about two domes. And the exterior dome is almost, I mean, we're going to at some point in time, something's going to happen. It's leaking. It has been sprayed on the inside. They call it gunite. It looks to me like a fibrous concrete. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the water's leaking on that, and that's deteriorating, and then it flakes off in chunks, and that's what caused the problem with the interior dome, mm-hmm. the stained glass dome that you see from the inside. A piece fell through and fell all the way to the first floor, mm-hmm. And broke a piece out of that dome. Mm-hmm. But in the process of looking at that problem, we found out that it's deteriorated too. It's 105 years old, 110, you know, and it needs to be re-leaded, and that what we've removed it at least is being stored now safely, and been replaced by I think it's Lexan they put in place over where the dome was, so that the pieces of gunite could not fall from the top to the bottom of the courthouse, and so at least we're safe at the moment. Mm-hmm.
But that's a cork in a bottle.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
It's not a tight cork either.
The stained glass may be, I mean, it's a beautiful piece of art, and yes. There's no other way to put it. It's unique in several features, and the amazing part of that, our search on that, is the glass company that made the glass for that dome is still in business.
Really?
That's amazing.
From 105 years ago.
Yeah, so matching the piece out of the that got broke shouldn't be a problem, because they did the original one. You know?
How interesting.
Yeah.
Now, with this increase, how would Logan County compare with surrounding counties?
I don't have the exact figures. Good question. I know in our discussions that several people brought up what they were in the surrounding ones, and it brings us up to, at best, even, or a little below the surrounding towns and that. Peoria, Bloomington, Springfield. So, and everybody's went up here recently. A lot of the surrounding areas, as we did, passed the school tax, the 1 cent for the school tax here. Probably, I don't know, seems like it was just yesterday, but it's probably 4 or 5 years ago. And so they're, if you drive out of town and eat supper or something, they're 9.5 in most places, and so I think it'll still leave ours in Lincoln at that level or below. So,
do most find their way to have an exemption for the food stuffs and so forth?
Groceries are exempt, and it's by state law on the public safety tax. It's delineated in the law that certain items are exempt, and without the list in front of me,
expenditure for a lot of people, so a lot of people won't have to worry about that, except for the other miscellaneous spending that they do. So, Mr. Reuben, you've been with us a long time in the county board. I'd like to make a statement about our public servants, so to speak. every once in a while you get somebody's catching hell for something. And that's the nature of the game. If you're going to be on the city council or the county board, you're fair game for somebody. The counter to that is that there are some people who are serving who are really well-intended folks and want to use the word serve in that sense of the word. And so if you get kind of torqued about a public servant, be it an elected or an appointed official, remember, if you'd ask yourself if you'd want that job. So how long have you been on the board, Mr. Reuben?
Since 2002. 16
He's
years.
just a newcomer.
Well, you must be on the finance committee, or you wouldn't be talking about this.
Well, I was on the finance committee up until, a little over a year ago. I was elected chairman, but I was chairman of the finance committee for the entire time I was on the board before that, through very unfortunate circumstances. And I was asked if I would be interested in serving by the former finance chairman, Rod White, and local man from our town, Lloyd Hellman, who, was on the board for a number of years. And they both explained to me that, Rod was wanting to retire from it. He'd been on 20 years. And I said, decided that I would. And they said, well, we'll get you on a few committees and get you broke in. And unfortunately, Mr. Hellman got sick, and it moved everybody. The person that was going to take finance chairman became the county board chairman. And they said, well, you can do the finance chairman's job.
Well, they just gave you a little job.
Yeah, a little job. Yeah, right off the bat. Yeah. And but they, and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because they had Rod was a great help. I mean, he was there. Anytime I called him, he'd answer
Rod
the
worked
question.
hard at his job when he was on that
and
board.
they made it a very easy transition, and so it went well, but it's a pretty steep learning curve the first year.
Oh, I should suspect. I can't think of a nightmare that would exceed that right now.
Yeah, we're not talking nickels, dimes. This is more than Woolworth and Kresge's money.
Well, and it's not yours.
Yeah.
Right.
You're representing the people who gave it to you.
You're trying to be conservative with the money wherever you can, and there's a lot of differences in a public body like that, because there's different funds that this fund can't be spent for this, and but this fund, but we have a lot of good help. We've had down through the years, we've had a lot of good accounting firms that have done the audit for the county, and their help. They know the laws, and we've had good treasurers that keep the books and make sure that things are, they also know the laws and where things can be spent, and that what you can transfer from this fund and that. And so,
well, it may be because I know those folks, as many do know those folks that are working the courthouse that are servants, so to speak. I've always said, Charles, that I think we have probably the best courthouse employees in 102 counties.
I would agree with that 100%.
We have some people who really step to the plate and do more than just their job.
Yes.
And the way they serve the public at their counters and so forth, we just have a solid courthouse up there.
They can't get an argument out of me on that. Several of them have been there before I got on the board. So they've been there a longer time than I have, and they provide a lot of guidance, and it's just they're just a tremendous bunch of people.
You mentioned the public safety complex and the needs there. Are we in non-compliance?
I don't believe we're in non-compliance, but we're crowded, and that leads to problems with segregation because they got, as everybody knows, these, we still pass laws. We can't do a lot of other things, but we pass new laws, and we have new court cases that come down where people win rights. I don't know whether they win them or they delineate them.
Yeah.
But there's several prisoners groups that try to keep an eye on the jails, and probably with some necessity and maybe some not necessity, but it does require new. I know one of the new items that we had to put in at our jail was a TV screen at the booking area that scrolls through the prisoners' rights, so they can look at that while they're being booked.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
If they're literate.
My heart just swells with that.
Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, you have to follow the rules. But I think the big thing the sheriff's been looking at in that situation is the crowded situation. Our jail was, oh golly, it seems new to me. I mean, it's been, built in the 70s, I believe, and but it was built at a time where you didn't have all these rules, and now the rules make it more difficult because of the way it's designed, its actual structure. The 4 people in a cell, and they want more segregation now, and
So each person has their own space?
well, not so much that, but just that they, with small complaints, they have to separate prisoners from each other. And
like fisticuffs?
Excuse me?
Like fisticuffs or something?
Well, that and other things,
You want to talk about that other thing?
No, I don't want to talk about that other thing. So it's just, it seems rather, I hate to use the word silly, but that's what I'm going to use.
Well, a lot of them do. There are some folks who we send to Springfield in the legislature who think it's incumbent upon them to legislate something. Well,
Well, they have to justify their existence,
Well, and we see some awful silly laws coming out of there. Now, I saw this morning that the governor had vetoed the most recent gun bill. And as I read the article, the very purpose of his veto was simply, and I hope I'm correct about this, that there were so many guns, it duplicated, and so it just confounded the problem. And there's no need to keep duplicating bureaucracy.
Right. We make a law that's already on the books, and we make another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we make laws we can't enforce. That's the worst thing. I mean, I rail against that because, we make an ordinance, I'm all for the idea. We banned smoking in the parks.
Yeah. You did what?
We banned smoking.
You got to quit that. You're stepping on people's rights.
Yeah. Well, and I understand it, and I agree with it, but I know we can't enforce it.
Of course.
We're not going to have a police officer standing out there in a park. Now, you get, from a sign, you get partial compliance, and maybe that's good enough, and maybe that's enough of a reason to do it, the partial compliance, and most people are considerate, and if somebody says, hey, you're not supposed to be smoking here, they probably put it out rather than create an argument, but
it's a nebulous thing at best, I don't know, world. Well, sometimes, we have to make a transition, and that means transition from talking to Chuck Reuben to spouting off a few words in favor of our sponsors, who are very loyal people. Go ahead, Mr. Ash. And we're right back live in the studios here at WLCN. Our guest this morning on Viewpoint is a gentleman who's been serving the county since 1922, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like that.
Right.
Mr. Charles Reuben from over the Emden Way, comes off Scully Prairie. We appreciate you sharing not only your time with us this morning, Mr. Reuben, but sharing your talents and a lot of time serving as a county board member. I remember way back when I was a little fellow, my grandfather served on the county board. I had no cognizance whatsoever what that meant at that time, but I just knew he was proud to be a county board member, and that goes back many a year. Our county board members, both genders, work hard. Sometimes they whiz us off a little bit. That's the nature of public service, you know. As I said earlier, if you think seriously enough about it, you don't like what they do, run for the office and see how much you like that. Charles, what is the financing? Of course, you're chairman of the Finance Committee, but is there one outstanding problem that the county board member faces as a whole, other than the old specter of finance?
I do want to correct one thing. The current finance chairman is Dr. Hepler.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's right. That's your neighbor down there.
So I'm the past finance chairman. Yeah. So he's taken over that role and done a very good job in that role. So. Yeah.
You were talking about unenforceable rules. Mm-hmm. I just read the darndest thing that is one of the little-known rules in the state of Illinois. If you make a decent effort in the wintertime, or this morning as they're going down the stairs, where it's slippery, a woman had sued because she'd slipped on the ice. And she lost because in Illinois, if you've made a decent effort and somebody falls on the ice and breaks their what have you, it's too much responsibility to ask the citizenry to keep all the sidewalks and streets clear. And that was the excuse, too much responsibility. Mm. Well, God knows we got a whole raft of people out there avoiding that.
Yeah.
So here's another chance. I thought that was the funniest thing I ever heard.
Well, there are a lot of stupid things out there that, in a matter of laws and regulations, and every once in a while on the net, if you haven't got too much to do, Charles is too busy for that, but you can kind of dial up on Google dumb laws, and you'll see dumb laws from Nova Scotia to Mexico.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
But the one overriding problem that the board as a whole is facing and is working with, besides the obvious specter of finance that comes up every day, that we have such a need, and that's why this tax is so very, very important. And I think we ought to once again emphasize that 50 cents on $100. Judy spills that much by 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah.
So, what about as you said as a group? What do you talk about?
Well, as you find out when you get on the board, a lot of it's routine. It's standard stuff. It comes through. I mean, 90% of our votes are real simple, and then you get a few controversial items, and I mean, we do a lot with people wanting to use the parks and wanting to use the courthouse steps for the prom and that, and those are pretty simple votes. I mean, they go through and pretty. Then we come to other issues. I mean, we've got current issues right now are we're in the process of reappointing as an assessor, and that has some controversy in the board, and that's probably going to come up next month, and should be an interesting talk among the board members, and so we'll see where that goes and what happens in the future with that.
What do you do when these unexpected things happen, like the dome situation, which is going to cost $2.98, and you've got your budget all set up and things are going pretty smoothly, and bingo. It's just like at home, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And we try to, in our budgeting process, we have tried to build up some reserves in the past. Now they've disappeared again. We had a pretty not near what the auditors would like to see you have a half to, or maybe to a full year of reserves in a perfect world, and we've never had that under my term, but we were getting up there where it was pretty decent, and then we had a year where things went wrong and they went down, and then we had the dome situation, which for safety's sake we spent $158,000 to have it taken down and stored, and the Lexan put into place to keep it safe in the first floor of the courtroom, or first floor of the courthouse. And that $158,000
That's a big piece of change,
yes,
man.
And that's only stopgap. I mean, that wasn't a permanent thing. That was to do what was absolutely necessary.
Right, just for safety.
Yeah, safety reasons, only safety reasons, yeah.
And but we had a separate fund in the airport. We have an airport and farm fund, and it has done pretty well in the last few years with the way the cash rents have gone. With the increase in the cash rents, it's built up a surplus. Well, we pretty well delineated that surplus. We deleted it pretty hard, and hopefully, if things go right, we can put that back. So, because they need surplus, they have the airport has projects that they do, such as overlays, and that would cost.
I'd like to mention the airport just a minute. 648-5510. We have with us this morning a public servant, Charles Reuben, comes from over there, as I say, at Scully Prairie headquarters, Amden. Charles represents folks who spend a lot of time on our behalf. By his own volition, he's run for that office, and so maybe the good comes with the bad. Sometimes you have to get some angry phone calls, I presume. That goes with the territory, and you knew that going in.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people we have the airport out there on the north side of town. Most of us take it for granted. It's been there forever, and so we don't realize as a citizenry that actually belongs to us. That's the county, and it's under your jurisdiction, and it comes upon you to spend the money out there as necessary to keep that a viable operation. Is there a big problem with that, Charles?
Well, the nice thing about airports is they're also federally regulated and federally subsidized. When we do a project out there, generally 90% of that project's paid for by the federal government. And you do 5-year plans at the airport, lining up the projects, and you'll have all the Illinois Department of Transportation and Federal Aviation all approve those projects. And if everything goes right, the federal pays 90% of the project, the state pays 5%, and the county pays 5%. So we get off pretty cheap. But these projects, a lot of them run into
Heavy money.
Heavy money, yeah. $1 million is not uncommon for an overlay of the, runways and things. And we currently got a project out there on the fuel farm is antiquated, where the airplanes can buy fuel, and we're going to put a new fuel farm out there with new tanks and new concrete. And
if I was a private pilot and going from Timbuktu, I needed to stop at Logan County for gas, I can taxi up there and with a credit card or whatever, buy some gas at the Logan County Airport.
Yes, that would be the way it would work, but we've just gotten, I believe we've just got a letting for that. And this is why you have committees, because we have an airport committee with an airport committee chairman, and fortunately for me, he does all the work out at the airport. Because it is a big job. I mean, we have a lot of hangars that rent out. We have a new fixed-based operator, which means it's a person that works on airplanes. We're just in the process of getting a new person in for that.
And they have to have an A&E license to do that.
Yes, and we got to, they'll rent we have a main hangar, more or less, that they're trying to rent, and so we have to get all those details have to be worked out, and I know he's spent a lot of time at that here lately, talking to them and showing it. You got to show them the area. You got to decide. Well, they want this. This wall was put in by the previous one. Well, I really don't want that wall, and just a lot of little things, and then the problems of when we rent, and I can't even tell you the number of hangars we rent. It's considerable.
Really?
But they all require maintenance too. You get the guy comes and he says, "Hey, my hangar door won't push open anymore," and then he has to go and either fix it himself or get somebody to fix it. Some of the minor things, he can take care of, but mainly he gets, he has to arrange for somebody to come out and be at the airport and fix it, and that's, this swings over to the lighting along the runways, and we had a lightning strike a few years ago that took out a bunch of the runway lights, and you got to get the electricians out there and have them fixed, and it's a lot bigger job than anybody realizes. Plus the required, such as the probably the big one that everybody sees is the light at night, that has to be working and maintained working, and things that people don't know about. There's at the end of the runway there's an approach system that tells them how high they are as they come in. Well, that all has to be maintained, and there's a radio beacon that has to be maintained, and there's just a tremendous amount of things, and we haven't had a airport manager for since it was way before I was on the board when they actually had a manager out there, and since that time, it's been taken care of by the airport chairman. And
are you aware, Charles, of the amount of what I would call casual traffic that comes? Are there many people who use it on a casual basis?
Oh, I think we have a lot of pilots in the area, because we have pilots that have their airplanes here from Bloomington and Springfield, because
we do. It's
a smaller airport. It's easier to take off and land from our airport than it would be where there's commercial traffic. And then of course we do have more or less a commercial operator there in the Chuck Hallsworth has his spray operation out of that airport, and during the summer there's a lot of traffic for that spray business, so they run, I think I've seen up to 5, I think I've heard him talk about up to 5 spray planes flying out of there at the proper time.
So all in all, it's a pretty active little airport.
Yes, it is.
That's what I'm hearing. So, as I say, we just drive by it and realize it's there and don't take too much attention to it.
We probably a lot of things that people don't know. There's a courtesy car out there for people that fly in, and there's a system for them to use that to go into town and maybe eat supper, or I know when the Beck station was being built on the west side of town, the owner of that flew in and used our courtesy car. And it's not much of a car, but
well, with 4 wheels.
It's 4 wheels. That's about at that time. That was about all we could say. But he, inspected the building progress and flew back out, and so it's you learn a lot on the county board, and some of it's good, some of it's not good. Such as we're back to the safety complex. The number there. I believe the sheriff said they have room for 59 prisoners, and unfortunately they're full a lot of the time.
Yeah, we got a lot of bad little guys and girls that drop in there for sometimes for a short stay, and some of them are there for a long time while they're waiting trial and so forth, and we got to take care of them.
Yes. And
59 current inhabitants there.
well, I don't know
today.
what the current number would
Well,
be, and I
it's
wouldn't
close.
want to say,
Yeah.
I get leery of talking about anything about the safety complex too much because you don't know what you should say and shouldn't
Pretty
say
flexible, sure.
for
Well,
security.
what it comes down to is we're certainly utilizing that space,
Yes.
aren't we? That kind of surprises me, any number in that area, because we're not exactly the biggest county in the state.
No, and what is even more maybe depressing is that we house no juvenile prisoners in Logan County.
Oh, is that right?
They're all transported out of the county to a facility that we rent space off of because they.
And that costs us per head.
Oh yes,
per
yes,
capita.
yes, and
Plus the transportation.
fortunately we've had. That's mostly been set up by the various probation officers we've had while I've been in. Current one being Kim Turner. She oversees sort of that end of it, and we have gotten a contract to get it for a lesser amount than if we just
On a pay-per-day basis.
on a pay-per-day basis.
Yeah.
So we try to save money where we can, and as you mentioned earlier, our people are very good at their jobs, and they also have our thoughts about saving money and where we can, and they help as much as we possibly can. So
Further on the money business and talking about the airport and how the FAA contributes and the state contributes and so forth. Now, on this dome situation, is there any historic committee at the state level or what have you that would help you?
yeah, well, you give me, and I believe you already talked to Mr. Bateman in the past.
He was here,
Kevin
yes.
Yes, he was here.
And
I wasn't,
he's-
though.
She was at the Institute drying out.
He's our building and grounds chairman, and of course with the dome project, he's taken the lead with that, and he did a huge amount of investigation. You can't, pat him on the back the next time you see him because he's done a wonderful job finding somebody that could restore the dome if it comes to that, and somebody that could tell us what it needed to be done. He's gotten engineers to come in for little or no money to inspect things and say that the superstructure that's there, the steel that's there, is solid, and that's why we want to repair the outside of the dome. If the superstructure had gone, it'd be a whole different story. But they said it's solid as a rock. But he has also investigated a lot of the grants, and there are a couple out there. Unfortunately, they're 4 years. I think he said they're 4 years away. They've got projects planned for 4 years, and so I don't know whether we can wait that long.
Well, but could they do it on a reimbursement basis somehow?
I don't think that this particular one does it that way. It's more or less, I guess what it boils down to is if you've already done it, your need goes away.
Okay, well.
And they look for need, and it didn't sound like it was possible. And he's still looking into those things. There's various ones that maybe get a little something for, especially the interior dome because of its art value. But those all take time to, you've got to fill out the forms and you go into a selection process.
But dimes make dollars,
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And, but he's working on that, and hopefully something comes along in that sense.
Surely everybody in the county must have been in the courthouse at some point. You'd have to go for something. Mm-hmm. And it is so beautiful. It's just a darn shame.
Yes, it is. And we did, speaking of the grants, and our former building and grounds chairman got a grant for fixing the clock. That's why the clock's back up and running again.
Which is a neat little thing in and of itself. I know it's not a big item,
Yeah,
and yet it really is. It's part of the aura of of history.
Most everybody likes it. There's a few that complain about the dinging in the middle of the night, but
There are people who would complain with the gold rope around their neck.
well, but
That's right.
But you have to do most things you have to do for the majority, and I think the majority welcomes the clock being there and working again. And so, we do try to do that, but grants, since 9/11, grants for other than safety now,
Oh, yes.
our safety our EMA, emergency management, that sort of things, the things for security have been real easy. Grants come pretty easily for that. And, but this doesn't qualify for that kind of a grant.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Charles, let's let the populace know. Your meetings are open meetings except for executive sessions.
Right, correct, yes.
So, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, from whoever, they can walk in and listen.
Yes.
Keep their mouth shut. They do have an opportunity to ask questions at a certain part in the program. So, the people who might want to avail themselves. When do you meet and how often, sir?
The committee meetings are all held at the safety complex.
These are all open meetings, sir.
They're all open meetings. You do have to come to the safety complex, and the front door of the safety complex, because it's a safety complex, is a secure area, and they buzz you in and send you down to our meetings held in the Blue Room in the basement of the safety complex. And everybody's welcome. I mean, we do have public comments at the end of every meeting. They are time limited because,
Sure.
it just, if you don't put a time limit on it, somebody can really hold up a meeting, and it just for, I guess, operations, it just keeping things going. We have a time limit. And then the main meetings for the board, for the full board, we have a workshop session, and we have the voting session of the board. And the voting session is, unless it's been changed for a special purpose, it's always the third Tuesday of the month. And the workshop session is always the Thursday before the third Tuesday, because that sometimes varies between the second and the third Thursday because of the timing. And those are at the courthouse. If we're not anticipating a lot of public participation, they're held in the first floor courtroom at 7 o'clock. Except this month we're going to go at 6 because of it's the same day as the election. And the county clerk, who acts as the board secretary at those meetings, keeps the record of that meeting, asked if we went early so she could be done to count votes when the polls close at 7. And so we should be, we're anticipating at least a relatively short meeting this month. And if the meetings are anticipated, such as when we had the hearings for the wind farm or something that's controversial, we go up to the third floor courtroom for the size. It's much bigger, and it's really pretty. It's a nice place to hold a meeting. I really, that has an old style courtroom feel, all the wooden chairs. And
It's part of history, that whole area up there. Yeah. And you step in there and you can see, you just visualize that. We have, very fortunate in this community that we don't have a lot of major criminal trials as such, but what few we've had have taken place right there in that room. Yes. Do you have anything to comment before, Mr. Reuben, as we close?
Well, I guess, again, I'm hoping that people will support this referendum, and it's going to be necessary to do these projects. I don't know how they're going to. I mean, we've looked at the budget over and over, and there's no way to do it other than this referendum. If this fails, we'll be back again in some form or another to ask again. We're hoping that the wind farm that's going to start here, probably they'll start this week down in Mount Pulaski with the switch yard, and very shortly they'll be starting on the towers down there. We'll add some needed income to the county and to the school districts in the area. And my last contact with the one that's west of Lincoln is that they're going to build next year. So
Is that right? Judith Kay?
I'd just like to tell him thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Bless your heart.
Yeah, we always try to close up with some comment and this morning I Googled this one up, and it comes, no surprise, but it comes from whom we hope will be the new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. And he said it should surprise no one that I'm not arguing for small government. That I'm not going to be arguing for small government, reduced spending and getting our finances in order, along with most reasonable regulations. That's paramount, most reasonable regulations. Too many regulations oftentimes. Some of them aren't reasonable. But Charles Reuben, we thank you very much for being with us, sir.
Thank you.